Alright, welcome back to NNN, Northern Nevada News, your #1 FM station for all things Northern Nevada.
Horror in the High Desert is the kind of series that has viewers scanning every inch of their screens and every frame of the films, trying to figure out what they may or may not be looking at. And with Majesty, the newest entry in the series, well, we're so back.
This is the part in the timeline that changed everything.
Well, as back as we can be with a franchise that shows us next to nothing and explains even less. But here we are, back to talk about Part 4, which is admittedly a massive step up from Part 3. Now, this is because Majesty wisely follows in the steps of Minerva instead of Firewatch in terms of horror visuals and lore, giving us multiple instances of the disturbing desert people that we saw in parts 1 and 2, without relying on any evil trees or shrubs for scares. And while the series is known for posing infinite questions without giving any real answers, Majesty actually does provide a resolution for one of Horror in the High Desert's most mysterious characters. But we'll circle back to that, because for now, let's give a synopsis of the film. Horror in the High Desert 4 focuses on the history of Majesty Ranch, currently owned by Dolly Broadbent and her husband, and passed down to Dolly by her parents, Nancy and Beau Broadbent. A fire breaks out on the ranch, which leads to the discovery of a mysterious box.
Dolly and I have been searching for this box for years.
The box belonged to Dolly's father, Beau, and contained both film and Polaroids, as well as a corresponding timeline of events, all documenting Beau's decades-long investigation into unexplainable phenomena both on and around Majesty Ranch, as well as Beau's interactions with a mysterious individual known only as Odd Man.
I will call him Odd Man.
We're not going to cover Beau's entire timeline because it's very lengthy, but what we want to do is cover the most important parts.
From here, we're treated to copious amounts of Beau's footage, as well as his interactions with the inexplicable desert creatures. With the earliest one photographed behaving seemingly much different from the others.
I was working on the fence when I heard Nancy scream, "He's holding Dolly."
We'll come back to this at the theory section near the end of the video, but for now, let's talk about Mantis Mining Company.
If you've been following this story, then you probably remember that Mantis Mining Company and Freight Pacific purchased this enormous piece of land in northeastern Nevada.
A portion of the Mantis property ran up against Majesty Ranch, and for some unknown reason, the company really wanted this section of Beau's land.
First, they tried to buy the ranch for just a ridiculous price, but it could never leave the family, so my dad would have never sold it.
When this didn't work, they tried to have a judge rule that Beau's land belonged to them, but they were caught trespassing on Beau's property, seemingly hyper-focused on an old abandoned mine entrance. Once Mantis lost the court case, Beau's livestock started turning up dead, and then this happened.
It was someone that worked for Mantis. They were trying everything they could to scare us out of there.
1 week after that photo was taken, they came back in the middle of the night and tried to blow up the entrance.
And this is where the Odd Man comes into play.
Today I got a call from a man who would not give me his name. I will call him Odd Man. He knew what was going on at the ranch. He insisted that we meet in person. A small house off Highway 50.
This house turns out to be none other than the house next to the trailer where Minerva died.
Minerva discovered some pretty graphic and disgusting tapes that were recorded in the basement of her trailer.
The odd man never does show up to that meeting, and when Bo gets home, he finds his front door wide open and learns later that the odd man had left him something.
He had taken my camera out of the truck while I walked around looking for him. He left a surprise.
Unbeknownst to Bo, this sets off a kind of cat and mouse game between the two men.
Against my better judgment, I snuck onto Mantis property. I had to see if there was any weight to what Odd Man had to say. I could not stop thinking about it.
After hearing the sound repeated back to him, Bo makes his way to another abandoned tunnel, where he encounters a strange light, seemingly floating in front of him. Everything comes to a head when Bo is stalked at his home by the desert creatures, which causes him to take off and go searching for the odd man. This leads Bo to the trailer that Minerva would later move into, and the basement down below. All of this turns out to be a trap set by the odd man, who locks Bo in the basement with the desert creatures.
Wait!
Who are seemingly living down there in the basement. But Odd Man's plan is foiled, and Bo manages to escape by killing him with a crossbow.
There really is no way for us to know for sure who this person is. No deaths in the county match this type of death that we see in the videotape.
The film ends on a tragic note when the viewer finds out that it was Bo's wife who hid the box from him, fearing that he was becoming obsessed with the mystery and it was driving him insane. Ironically, it was Bo losing the box that caused him to go mad.
I would be a disaster too if there was a tape of me murdering somebody out there that had just gone missing.
The film ends stating that a Mantis Mining Company employee wants to talk to the filmmakers. And that's pretty much it. So, what the fuck is going on? Well, let's start with what the film never says, but quietly confirms. Majesty's biggest revelation is that the odd man is actually the same person that was kidnapping women in the tape that Minerva found in her trailer in part 2. And while the film never outright says it, judging by the fact that they both wear gardening gloves, and that the odd man traps Bo in the same basement that the Minerva tape was filmed in, then we can say for certain that they're the same person. They even have the same weird voice. Now, this is fascinating for a few reasons. First, we now know that the odd man is dead, and has been for a long time, which means that he wasn't involved in what happened to Minerva or Emiliana. Second, it seems likely that the tape Minerva found was actually one of Bo's tapes. We can infer this from the fact that the odd man steals Bo's camera and records himself using it, which would explain why the creepy footage is intercut with someone wandering around the desert at night. But perhaps the most interesting thing that we learn from Majesty concerns one of Odd Man's victims.
Charity Henderson, the woman identified as the victim of the unseen assailant in one of the videos, is a distant relative of the founding member of Mantis Mining Company.
And this says a whole lot. Okay, hear me out. Judging by the photo, Mantis Mining Company is old, like late 19th century old, and historically, mining companies didn't need to own the land above their mines, which means they could tunnel for miles under property they didn't own, and Nevada just so happens to be one of the most uranium-rich regions in the country, and uranium mining has a long history of catastrophic accidents. exposure, contamination, and people being permanently altered as a result. Now, what if Mantis caused some kind of catastrophe in a mostly desolate area of the Nevada desert sometime in the early 1900s, which not only immediately killed some of the working miners, but also caused contaminated ash or radioactive particles to fall from the sky? Not only would this have caused severe radiation poisoning and subsequent deformities to anyone living nearby, but it would also explain sightings of men in hazmat suits and protective gear surveying the surrounding area. This might also be the reason for the desert people's odd vocalizations, which may be due to vocal cords that have been mutated or damaged by radiation. And that would explain people feeling sick when they're nearby.
My eyes are starting to bug me. I can't breathe at night. I keep waking up and I'm just kind of foggy.
I started getting this feeling that I was being watched. I would just start getting physically sick. I would get really nauseous.
Now, historically, living in extreme isolation has sometimes led to cannibalism, which may be the reason the desert people are kidnapping their victims. But survival doesn't always look the same, and there may be another reason. If the desert people have been living in isolation for generations, then it's very likely that their numbers are extremely low, and preserving their lineage may have become a top priority, which means the kidnappings may be about reproduction instead of consumption. And this would explain so much, like why the desert people and the odd man seem to target women, and why we see the belongings of children in an otherwise desolate area of the Nevada desert. And why one of them seemed to try to entice Dolly when she was a little girl.
One of them approached my 6-year-old daughter, Dolly. She told us it sang to her.
And I don't know about you, but for me, this figure in the footage from Minerva never looked like a man. To me, it always looked like a pregnant woman hobbling around the woods at night. Speaking of children, maybe this is where Odd Man came from. What if he's a descendant of one of the original victims of the uranium mining accident? Keep in mind that he wears a bag on his head, which could be to conceal hereditary radiation damage. And his deformities may be less extreme, which allows him to move more freely through the region. He also tried to lock Bo in the trailer where one of these desert people, possibly Odd Man's own father or grandfather, was sleeping or maybe even living. And this would explain the Mantis connection. Remember that Charity Henderson, Odd Man's victim that he delivered to the desert people, is a distant relative of the founder of Mantis Mining Company, which means that Charity's kidnapping may be about retribution for what was done to Odd Man and his family. And remember, this all took place decades before Minerva moved into the trailer, which means that Odd Man had been dead for years by that point. And if he served as a collector for the desert people, then that means at some point they had to start procuring women themselves, which would explain why one of them took Emiliana, and possibly what happened to Minerva, who may have been a potential abductee, but was killed while trying to escape.
The thing I remember the most is the position her body was in.
And since all of this seems to be due to negligence on the part of Mantis Mining Company, then of course they would do everything they could to cover it up. And that would explain them buying up land, filling in the trailer basement, and sealing up the mines, especially if they know the desert people use the mines to navigate the desert. And that would explain why Bo hears the sound repeated back to him at the sealed mine entrance, and why it seems to travel with him like something is following him underground. And all of this unfolds against the backdrop of a state long associated with nuclear testing, restricted land, and fallout incidents that were quietly buried and purposely covered up. Now, if all of this seems a little too much like The Hills Have Eyes, don't worry, because it's about to get all kinds of supernatural.
I have come to understand that there is more than one kind of threat sharing this high desert with us.
Remember how I mentioned that there would have been Mantis employees that were killed instantly during the uranium accident? Well, what if the spirits of those individuals went on to haunt the area of the Nevada desert cursed to roam the desolate wilderness because of the unfinished business of no justice for their deaths. And if that's all true, then this floating light, which looks suspiciously like a miner's headlamp, suddenly makes a lot more sense. As does the man in this picture, who looks conspicuously like a miner from the early 1900s. This figure doesn't fear the light and doesn't seem to have any ill intentions, as evidenced by Dolly smiling in the photo and the man cradling her. Maybe his spirit was trying to protect her from one of the desert people. Now, I know there's some holes here, mainly concerning the scary trees and how they fit into everything. But remember, the ending of Firewatch calls into question everything that Oscar filmed.
Oscar came here as a vlogger, an influencer. You know, he came to Nevada because he wanted a big discovery. He wanted this big reveal about what happened to Gary. You know, is his footage real or is it a hoax? I mean, is it all staged? I think that's what we have to decide.
And I think this was probably the director testing the waters to see which direction to take the series in. And when people responded negatively to the scary trees, he leaned in hard to the desert people for part 4, which explains the absence of the evil shrubs in Majesty. But hey, I reserve the right to be wrong about all of this, because the series presents so many individual mysteries that there's room for infinite explanations. And I don't know how they'll all be resolved in one final movie, but in my opinion, things need to get really grim and dark. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments section.